welcome into the DNVR Avalanche emergency podcast because we got off the show and the Avs decided, it'd be cool. Let's make a trade now that they're done. Jesse, AJ, Rudo, and Felix Sicard from the fourth period covering the Anaheim Ducks joining us to talk about Josh Manson, who the Avs have just acquired. Officially, it looks like it's Drew Helleson in a second-round pick for Josh Manson. There's a little bit of debate on that pick, not 100% confirmed yet, but trade is definitely Helleson and a pick for Manson. So, AJ, I know you've heard a few things about some interest in Manson from the Avs for a little bit now, so not too surprised by this.
No, not at all. Actually, when I went to pull up some of his fancy stats and graphics and stuff, my pages were actually still there from when I looked at it the other day. So done.
Easy enough.
It was ready to go.
So one of the defensive prospects falls for the Avs, but Felix, are you going to sell us on Josh Manson, or are you celebrating this trade in Anaheim?
I think it's actually kind of a win-win. I mean, Josh Manson was really struggling last year, and it honestly kind of felt like he was on his last legs a little bit as a prime contributor, but this year he's had a really nice bounce back. It does help that he's on a pairing with Cam Fowler, but I think there's a lot of stuff that you can dig into individually and say that he's pulling his weight on that pairing. So I think the Ducks get it looks to be a solid return, and the Avs get a guy who's playing some good hockey right now.
Yeah, we literally did a show this afternoon on ranking Colorado's trade assets, and we had Drew Helleson as kind of like the third-ish prospect.
Yep.
In their system, just because of he's not Justin Barron, he's not Oscar Olesen. Those guys are at the tip top. But Helleson, with his proximity to the NHL, he just finished his Boston College, which should be the end of his college career, this last weekend. He should be ready to sign and jump into pro hockey. He doesn't need a senior year. The Avs definitely are going to miss Helleson. He was a guy that when they had drafted him, the excitement was that, to be honest with you, he would turn into Josh Manson someday. Similar size, same kind of disposition, very physical players, and not really. They don't really like when guys take the puck into their corner. So Josh and. That's the loss in Helleson, is that they lose out on a guy that could have been pretty valuable for them down the road. But big question is the upside with Helleson and how good he ultimately gets. The second round pick, we all kind of figured that the Avs were going to clean house on a lot of their first.
That's what we're hoping for, actually.
We're for the first and second round picks for the next couple of years, we're expecting most of these picks to be gone by this time next week. So this is just the start of it. With Manson being a pending UFA, you're strictly viewing this through a rental lens right now. But Manson is exactly the kind of guy that we had kind of talked about the Avs targeting stylistically. They didn't need to go out and get another puck mover, another guy that's gonna aggressively jump into play and do things. And I tell you, it's funny because I watched Josh Manson score last night against the Islanders, and the way that he did it is he was jumping into the play, and he poked in a rebound just because he was crashing the net. And I almost tweeted out, like, boy, that's something that Colorado is really going to like when he gets there. And I was going to be like joking, right? But a day later, he's an Av, and I think the price tag, Drew Helleson had become a big-time fan favorite amongst prospects because he was big and nasty. And the second round picks are always like, those are valuable, but they're not firsts. You save firsts for the big guys, right? But Josh Manson at his best is nasty. He is nasty. He's mean. He's absolutely miserable to play against. And if you end up with a defense with Jack Johnson and Josh Manson on your third pairing, it's not going to move pucks very well. but it's going to be brutal to play.
No one
against.
wants to play against that pairing. Yeah,
and it's a pairing that is going to be surprising. Where it's going to quietly excel is in denying zone entries. Something that Colorado really likes to do. We talk about active sticks with their defense a lot. Josh Manson, even when Josh Manson wasn't at his best last year, still pretty good in denying zone entries. And that's an important part of kickstarting their transition play. And with Manson back to playing better right now, this was one that it's not going to look good from the analytics side of things because he really was bad last year. Felix, what I'm curious about from your side is what was the issue with Manson last year, and why was it? Why is there optimism? Why should there be optimism from our chat that's kind of melting down right now that he's on the upswing?
Right. Well, I think there's a couple things. First, I mean, he was hurt a couple times last year, and I mean, tended to get hurt when he was fighting, which definitely didn't help. So there was some inconsistency in his ice time just throughout the season, and I think that probably did him no favors. But also, I mean, I don't know how to say this kindly, but the Ducks were kind of a rudderless ship last season, systems-wise. They cleaned house over the summer with their assistant coaching staff, and I really think that this year they have a much more sound structure. And for a guy like Manson, who last year was encouraged to jump up into the play, like you alluded to, I think that he just looked more like a freewheeler on the ice, and he was trying to make plays, but almost just for the sake of making them as opposed to making the right read. And he's just not that kind of player. He never will be. When Josh Manson's at his best, he's making the simple pass, the simple kind of 5 to 10 foot pass out of the defensive zone. And I think this year, with the new assistant coaching staff in Anaheim, the defensemen are still encouraged to jump up, but they're a lot smarter about it. They're using the width of the ice better. And so I think it's a combination of his instincts maybe getting the better of him, wrong instruction, bad coaching, and also the injuries. And he also just wasn't good at times like that. There is that to acknowledge. But I think this year, now that the environment is better, he's been healthier, and there's more of a real NHL coaching staff, it helps. And I'm assuming that that's only going to get better now in Colorado with the coaching that they have.
Okay. We do have to answer this question, just given the fact, and chat, you can help us out with this one. Chat will probably know better than we will. Does Josh Manson fit team male model? What do we think? Yes.
I mean,
no?
He's got good flow.
Well,
yeah, that's an old picture. He's got the serious
done.
flow right now. Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I got to go pull up the picture. Let me find one real quick. I don't think the flow helps his case. I think the flow is a negative. Here we go. Here's a picture of the flow. That's with the hair.
Yeah, it's kind of a struggle flow.
Yeah.
I don't know if I think I agree with you.
So I'm seeing some yeses from the women. I'm not seeing any yeses from the men though.
All right, so the dudes aren't about it, but the ladies are.
Sounds
All
about right.
Do we know how he feels about choking?
Oh boy, here we go.
Just kidding. But I'm out on the male model portion of this.
Okay,
Just sacrificing the brand a little bit.
So I was Felix, because he's going to jump into the Avs second pair. Like AJ said, the Avs obviously like to have their defensemen jump up. You're saying that's not really his style. Question for you: who has he kind of been best matched with? As a partner the last couple of years in Anaheim, and how is he normally deployed by the like you said, the coaching staff last year, and now a team that I've actually really enjoyed watching the Ducks this year. They're an exciting team to watch.
Yeah, so I mean that is the big caveat with Josh Manson and some of his results is that he's been playing almost exclusively with Cam Fowler the last couple of years. And Cam Fowler's been excellent. Cam Fowler, I think, is one of the most underrated D-men in the NHL, which is weird because he used to be kind of overrated. So that is who he's been playing with, is a guy who does most of the heavy lifting, breaking the puck out. And I don't know exactly who's on Colorado's second pairing, who he would be playing with. But
Probably
Right
like
now,
Sam
we don't
Girard.
either.
Yeah.
yeah,
Ideally, you're probably talking Sam Girard.
Yeah.
so
Yes.
if it's a Sam Girard, then I think that actually kind of works because he needs a guy who's going to do most of, again, the heavy lifting, breaking the puck out. I think if he's the guy that's getting a bigger share of that pie, his decision making can be a little suspect. But I also just tend to think that the Avs have a much more intriguing, much better structure than the Ducks do. So I think that it seems like this transition should be okay.
Yeah.
I do wonder where he fits into a really up-tempo running, like go get him kind of style on defense, where the Avs encourage their guys to really get into the play.
So yeah, and I don't think I answered another part of your question, which is his deployment. So he is used more in that matchup style where he gets those defensive zone starts and he gets the other team's toughest competition. And I don't know if that will happen in Colorado, which I think is probably to his benefit because he's been a little miscast in Anaheim. And you could say that for a lot of their guys is they're playing a little bit above their weight. And I think if he's dropped a few pegs in the lineup, that's probably going to help his results quite a bit at every level. And as far as a skater, I don't think he's a great skater necessarily, but he has good mobility when he's backtracking. I think he's got some good lateral ability. I mean, he's got a really long reach, and in the defensive zone, I think most nights he has shown to be sound. Like the memory of last year is still really burned into my mind, but this year he has been a lot better.
Yeah, he's bigger than I thought.
That recency bias, man. It's tough to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it all checks out. I mean, it's one of those things where like we have a good sample here of this season where he's been good.
Is a little bit of this the Avs side insurance where they can get a guy who can throw hands that isn't Curtis McDermott to play
and can actually play hockey.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
They don't need Curtis McDermott anymore as the token, like, all right, we're just trying to settle things down out there. You know, we don't want things to get wild. Josh Manson can go out there and straight up body somebody if he needs to. And what I also like is that he's a really physical player. So you bring that, it's like a supersized, like it's like an NHL caliber hockey player version of Curtis McDermott. Like one that actually belongs in the league and not like this, like, I mean, like Curtis McDermott's a horrible defenseman. So, you know, like just that 1-to-1 replacement from last night's lineup to tomorrow night's lineup in LA. That right there, you just raised the floor a bunch.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and McDermott can go back and play it forward, and we aren't going to,
So there you go. So that's all.
We don't care.
That solves the mystery as to why there was no call up. Like, oh, we'll have a full lineup out there. Don't worry. We'll just have him drive. We'll just have him drive up. Yeah. Who's 45 minutes away?
Straight up.
No, but Felix, it'll be interesting because one of the things that is unique-ish about the way that Jared Bednar uses his D-core is he has rough pairings that he likes to match up, but he mixes his pairings up all the time depending on O-zone starts, D-zone starts. So, I mean, you know, you're talking late in games, he could be getting plenty of D-zone starts next to Taves. There's just a lot of really interesting combinations. AJ, like you said at the very beginning, just he gets you something different than what you've got.
Yeah. And like the cost of Drew Helleson, I see again, like Drew Helleson's NHL comp is probably like Josh Manson. So like that would if Drew Helleson turns into what Josh Manson has been for the Ducks, then this is a huge win for the Ducks.
Yep.
In that they're thrilled. And if Josh Manson ends up being an important part of a team that goes on to win a Stanley Cup, then obviously Colorado's also thrilled. But that's where with his pending free agency, that's where the success from Colorado's side, the side of this will be based on is how valuable is he and how deep do they go and how does he play? Because we saw with Patrick Nemeth last year, Patrick Nemeth was a big part of their failures against Vegas. He got rocked in that series. And Manson, you're looking at it and you're saying Josh Manson's been a better NHL player every day of his life in the NHL than Patrick Nemeth ever has been. And that's not to denigrate Nemeth. I just think Josh Manson, at Josh Manson's best, has been a really, really good defender in the NHL. And that nasty element, the sandpaper that he brings, he's miserable to play against. And part of the postseason is just being part of getting through a 7-game series is being miserable to play against. It's they dump and chase a puck, and Josh Manson just puts whichever opposing puts Jonathan Marchessault into the boards over and over and over and over. And Jonathan Marchessault stops going 100% and just says, this fucking sucks. I don't want to do this right now. By game 5, he's over it. He's bruised and he's battered because Josh Manson has made life miserable. That's the value that he's going to be able to bring to Colorado's back end that has really been lacking. And as Chad is bringing up, he is second on the Ducks in PK time per game.
We do have some advanced statistical graphics and things to look at here that will, I suspect, support everything that Felix has said so far. If we start with his player card, obviously the WAR projection is pretty bad, but you do see some positives here, I think, especially in the quality of competition and teammates. He's been playing with and against pretty quality stuff. Has a surprising amount of primary assists there, too.
Well, and where you look at the positive is you see that last year he absolutely bottomed out. He's been better this year, not as good as he was a couple of years ago when he was thought to be one of the more underrated defenders in the league. But that quality of competition should go down.
Yeah,
and the quality of team, like he should be playing next to Sam Girard eventually. And where Manson will be interesting is if Bowen Byram actually does get healthy, he's going to be able to, Manson could slide between second or third pairing,
right, and
really give them a different element. If he ends up on their third pairing, this feels expensive, but of course,
I mean, it's just that much more flexibility, right? With the bottom 4D, really, is what it is. Moving into a little bit of deeper info here, AJ, the one you sent me for 2020 was small and impossible to read. All you need to know about that one is he was very bad.
Yes, it was just I pulled it just for comparison's sake.
This season, it really is fairly solid top to bottom when you're looking at it. Yes, there's a little bit of a lack of individual contributions to the offensive side, but especially when you start talking about the zone entry prevention and things like that, starts to look pretty good for Manson.
Yeah, and even the puck retrieval stuff is good.
Yep. His individual like puck retrieval on dump-ins and stuff is very, very good. So we'll see. Emma, I know we've talked a lot about not wanting too much sameness on the Avs, but the Avs bottom 4D have had some issues breaking out the puck at times this year. Does he fall into that category? Or are you going to see a couple of breakouts where you're face palming with this guy?
I'll defer to Felix and let him speak to the puck moving ability.
I think with Josh, I mean, this is something that I don't know if we've touched on yet, but to the puck moving, there's going to be a few kind of like what just happened type plays where you're going to be scratching your head a little bit, I think. I'm just forewarning you on that. So the puck moving can be a little helter-skelter. The one thing that I think that I kind of popped into my head as you guys were talking about the playoffs is that Josh Manson does have a bad habit of taking really dumb penalties, like really dumb penalties. Like there's the Manson special that we've kind of started calling it. And and I do think that, like, it sounds really dumb, but in the playoffs, that stuff doesn't get called as much. And you kind of saw it with the Canadians last year with Weber and Sherratt, and basically cross-checking is now legal for a few games. So I think that Manson, from that perspective, because I think that's his single biggest wart, is that he takes a lot of value off the table with his penalty taking. The fact that, that presumably the Avs are going to be in a pretty solid playoff run, that might mitigate it quite a bit.
All right, so I want your opinion, Felix, because obviously from the Avs perspective, and that's a lot of, our chat is seen quite a few shout outs for you, but I think it's mostly Avs fans in the chat. What is your take on the return for Anaheim? With the limited knowledge that you have about Helleson, obviously another team's prospects, it's hard to keep tabs on all that. But just your take on what they got back.
I think it's a little surprising that it's not a first-round pick because that's kind of been the expectation, right? Is a pending UFA defenseman of Manson's caliber in recent years seems to have usually returned a first-round pick. And so the fact that they got a second-rounder, and that's with the full retention, that kind of leads me to think that they're
mentioned.
Yeah, which leads me to think that it probably wasn't going to be a second-rounder unless... I mean, it's either a worse prospect or a worse draft pick. I don't know which one it affected, but I think it's a solid return overall. I mean, a second-round pick, I think some people are higher on next year's draft than this year's. I don't know. Like, I haven't really thought about the draft very much this year, which probably says something about the season the Ducks are having. But the second-round pick seems, I mean, pretty solid. And then with Drew Helleson and what you guys have said, I think you put those two things together. And I don't know how high... Because that's the one thing we've always wondered is what is the perception of these guys around the league? And I think Manson has been well thought of, but with the season he had last year, some of the injuries, I think that this is a pretty reasonable return. I think for Anaheim, it's a good return. They get a guy who's kind of a one-to-one comparable, and you get a solid draft pick. And I think, I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but if you're getting picks from the Avs, you kind of want to get them further into the future. Just hoping that something goes wrong. Not wishing that on you, but just saying, like, I think
fair enough.
It's kind of a savvy because, like, why would you? In theory, their second rounder next year might be really close to what their first rounder will be this year. So it's I don't know. I think it's a good return overall. I'm not too underwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just always funny because I'm sure there's people on Anaheim side that's like, I can't believe that's all we got, and then there's Avs fans who are thinking that Joe Sakic just way overpaid, but you were expecting a first-round pick. Again, and we haven't even mentioned the 50% retention, so it'll only be, 2.05 against the cap?
Right, exactly. And I think that's a huge part to play in all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cheap in that regard.
Yeah, you just brought in money without sending any money out, which...
Yeah, that's
significant.
Nice.
Yeah.
We do have some isolated impacts and other things to look at for Manson as well, as far as visual aids. So,
Felix, if at any point you got to bounce, man, I understand. But feel free, obviously, to keep hanging out as long as you want.
Yeah, I think I actually have to go, guys. But thanks so much for having me on, though. Really appreciate it. This I'm still kind of like reeling in all of this. But so just to get confirmation, so you guys are Drew Helleson fans?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I will take a mental note of that going to.
Do you want to give a plug to everyone listening?
Tell the people where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, I do a weekly podcast called Crash the Pond, covering the Ducks with my good buddy Jake Rudolph. We go live on Twitch at 8 p.m. Pacific time on Monday nights. So if you want more on this, you can tune in tonight. We're on all the podcast streaming services, and I also do cover the Ducks at the fourth period. But really, just if you follow me on Twitter at Felix_Sicard, you'll find all the good stuff there.
Awesome. Thank you again for coming on, Felix. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Have a good rest of your show. Have a good one.
Okay. So, individual isolated impacts for Manson. Nothing looking particularly great here, but nothing terrible either.
Man, that isolated the +6 on defense is really bad.
It's not good, but
that would be the worst on the Avs outside of McDermott.
But also, you take a step forward and you get, okay, Anaheim's defense with him is actually better than it is without him by 7%. It's not nothing, about a quarter, not quite, 0.2 of a goal better with Manson on the ice. So, Felix talked about how much of that is Cam Fowler as opposed to Josh Manson. Debatable. But there's something positive to look at there. $7 from Drew here saying, so is it just me or does Mr. Sakic get Anaheim to keep 50% get you thinking about what's going to go down in 5 to 6 days?
Well, everything helps. To be honest with you, the way that LTIR works, the closer you are to the salary cap limit,
the more when you accruing,
when you have to put guys on LTIR, the better chance that you maximize it. So this just puts them really it puts them right on the edge of the limit here.
Yep.
They should continue to accrue. It's not going to be a lot over the next couple of days. And then if at any point they need to, they can LTIR as needed.
There you go. The offense, actually not that bad, again, relative to the Ducks. The offense is actually a little bit better with Manson on the ice. I don't think you're expecting a ton of offense out of him, but the numbers do point to a decent amount of facilitating of the puck from the point at very least. So take positives where you can get them, I guess, from this trade. The last thing, the PK numbers are bad.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at that because you wonder, well, Anaheim is 6th in the NHL in PK, and he's 2nd in PK per game.
Yeah.
And he's in like raw time played.
Sure.
You consider the injuries and stuff, he's like 4th. But again, injuries play a role in that raw number. But the per game, Manson is 2nd, playing almost 2.5 minutes of PK time.
Yeah. And so is a factor to consider. The Ducks PK is actually a little bit better without him so far this year, but neither of them are like otherworldly good, even for a team that's in the top 10 in penalty kill.
Yeah.
So, maybe John Gibson has something to do with that. I don't know. But,
well, and that's the other thing. That's where you're like, how is their PK so good? Because John Gibson has been below average again this year. So you're like,
sometimes things don't make any sense.
Yeah, that's hockey, right?
But we're overall, are we positive on this trade? Or do we think it's middling, negative? Because I know chat's not super confident.
No, so
go ahead.
Okay, so it was just because I just saw a comment and it said, we gave a 2nd round pick to age Helleson to 30, and to a level that's true, but like that's honestly exactly what you're trying to do here. This time of year. I said it today. You go through the rebuild process with. You need your picks. You need to develop your prospects to get you to this point. And then once you get to this point where the Avs are now, it is time to do stuff to win right now. So yes, those prospects, if they're not going to help you this year, the theory is you go trade them out for something that is going to help you right now because you've done the picks and prospects thing. You've developed, you've drafted. In the Avs case, you've drafted well. As little credit as people want to give them for developing. Your top lines, they're the best top line in the league, is all homegrown. Those are all homegrown draft picks, developed, whatever. So now you are swapping them out for, hopefully we get what we're hoping that guy to be, but we get him right now to help us go win a cup. You don't have to wait for the development. So obviously, go ahead.
To build off of that point, realistically, when was Drew Helleson going to be on this team?
2 years from now?
Because look at it. They weren't going to put both Justin Barron and Drew Helleson on next year's defense.
Right.
And just have 2 rookies down there and have basically the youngest defense in the league with old guy Eric Johnson. That wasn't going to happen. And that's assuming that Barron's even makes that defense. So you're looking at Helleson and you're saying, okay, it's not going to happen next year. He won't be a regular next year. What about the year after? So he would have had to have survived 2 trade deadlines on a cup contender and then get onto the team and then be an NHL rookie. And you're still probably not going to get the best out of him until year 3 or 4.
Yep.
He starts to really form into the guy that he's going to be in the NHL. So his 3rd year. So you're talking about we're 4 years down the road from today, when Drew Helleson really starts to pay off as Drew Helleson.
Yeah.
So that's if
it works out. That's a very real possibility that Drew Helleson gets to the AHL and things aren't clicking.
Doesn't have it and just tops out and just it's Cameron Gauntz all over again. Who just played in his 750th pro game.
Yep.
Right.
Has had a very good pro career as a borderline guy. That could be where it goes for Drew Helleson.
You see it happen with those guys all the time.
Yeah,
more often than not.
And with Helleson, like he'll get a better chance in Anaheim to succeed sooner.
Yeah,
just because of the environment that he's going to. So it really is like it sucks. It sucks to like draft Drew Helleson. You use a top 50 pick on him. You watch him develop and get better and better and better every single year. And then just as he's getting ready to turn pro and he starts to become in the mix for playing a game for the Avs, he's gone. Like that's no doubt I can understand the frustration from that side of it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
the second round pick next year, you're talking about an even longer timeline. You have no idea. Right. If you get another Sean Barons in that's 3 to 5 years.
You're 2 years away from that kid even turning pro.
Like, yeah. Right. So you're talking it is expensive for a guy that they played game 60 last night.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got 22 games left. You're going to get 22 games of Josh Manson in the regular season, and then however long your playoff run is, and probably he walks after that.
I would assume so.
Maybe he stays. Probably he walks. But his impact and what he can do to bridge the gap from that dominant top pairing.
Yeah, I don't even think you have to have that complicated of a conversation. Is Josh Manson better than the Johnsons? If you answered yes, I think you should be happy with this trade.
Well, and the other thing too that we haven't mentioned enough about why it did cost a little bit more, and Felix kind of alluded to it. You got the 50% retention, which Anaheim doesn't care because that means that they've got to pay a little bit to a guy that has been,
their salary cap is pretty irrelevant this year.
Right. And so, the owners have to write a couple smaller checks to Josh Manson. They're fine with that. It gives the Avs flexibility. Someone mentioned Giroux has a choice to make. This is, I mentioned it on our show just a couple hours ago that I had a feeling the Avs were going to start moving some tires this week. And they did, and it is kind of a show to Claude Giroux, like you mentioned, AJ earlier, who's worried about leaving Philly. Mm-hmm. We're making moves. We want you to come be part of these moves that we're making, but we are serious. Claude Giroux has full no move clause. Doesn't have to submit a list of teams. Nothing. He has the yes or no to any deal that Philly makes. This is a move that, hey, we're serious about making moves, and we're not just going to bring you in and hope that fixes everything. We are plugging the holes around you, and we're going to make room to bring in, a top level player like that. But it's having that 50% retention is huge.
Yeah,
it helps. I don't think the GMs have not used retention is the kind of leverage that we do when we build trade proposals and stuff. Because we're always like, oh, you have to pay the little extra to get the retention or whatever. On expiring deals, GMs have just been like, yeah, sure, we'll retain. We've got 3 retention slots. It's over after this year. This doesn't affect us at all. It's fine. Retention really only gets paid for on deals in which it matters in a cap situation for more than a year. Like in a JT Miller situation where a guy is signed. Retention really just hasn't been paid for like that. It's huge that the Avs got it because it just everything counts. Everything helps. Every ounce of space that they can get is meaningful. I'm just saying just the way that retention has been paid for the last few years, I don't think has been. And it doesn't match the way that we talk about it a lot of times.
I think it's a little bit different this year. For the most part, I agree with you, but it seems like more teams than normal are so close to the cap these last 2 seasons. Obviously, all the COVID stuff, the cap didn't go up like a bunch of people had planned and signed contracts for. So I do feel like there maybe is a little bit, if there's multiple people interested, multiple teams interested, I don't know. I feel like there's maybe a little bit more leverage for GMs who are having to retain this year. just because they know that teams need that. Like, if they don't retain the full amount, the Avs can't pull even this deal off.
Well, and then Anaheim
LTR, but-
and Anaheim doesn't get a prospect in the second round pick that they like from Colorado. Like,
right.
if it helps it get it done, it's easier to just retain. It's fine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And maybe that is a great point. We're looking to give you this. Which, wow, yeah, I know you really like it, but the cost of that is him with the retention. So, to your point, maybe it is not so much of, well, you have to up it if you want me to do that, but more of this deal isn't really on the table if you don't do that.
I think it does, to revisit our math from this afternoon, because this was mystery player X is now
Josh Manson.
Josh Manson.
Yep.
To revisit that math, boy, you got to think that Ryan Murray is like
sweating.
Starting to look up apartments in Philadelphia right now.
To answer one of the questions in chat, I do think it probably takes them out of Justin Braun or Travis Sanheim or
there's not really
Calvin
any reason
DeHaan
for them to go get another defenseman.
Yeah. Like, it doesn't make any sense for them to go and add another one.
Unless, like, the conversation changes if they're moving one of the Johnsons, maybe, instead of Murray. But
yeah, but at that point,
well, I mean, it would have to be EJ at that point.
I was going to say, unless it's Eric Johnson, it would make no
really
sense to move Jack Johnson instead of Ryan Murray.
I agree.
For really anybody involved. Yeah, no, that's a great point.
I still think there's a decent chance they just stick with 8D, but
I mean, look, the depth is enviable. It absolutely is, because beyond there, you're like, look, if catastrophe happens and 4 guys get hurt, realistically, you're probably fucking losing that series anyway.
Probably.
It's probably just done.
But if you're down a guy or two, Ryan Murray's serviceable.
Right, Ryan, like whoever of those 8 guys we're talking about, and this obviously is assuming that Byram plays.
Right.
Just because Byram's kind of on that way.
Yep.
So
Josh Manson is a right hand shot. I don't know if we've mentioned that. He's 6'3", what is it? 225, 230, depending on where you look.
Mm-hmm.
He big.
Big guy.
Thick boy.
Yeah, real physical, but so right hand shot. So really, I mean it's Gerard or Byram.
Yeah,
I mean, dude, back at full health. If your roster can get back to fully healthy, this just it pushes that decor that we talked about at the beginning of the year up a level.
Your bottom pairing is either Manson or Byram with a Johnson,
right?
Silliness. So
with a Johnson,
yeah. Whichever one you want.
Like. Yeah.
So now
at full health, it's like Gerard and Manson, Byram and Johnson.
Yeah, sure. However you want to sort that, it seems almost silly how deep that defense ends up being, and you're not.
Yeah. Because your depth is like, okay, you're gonna pull. Eric Johnson has a bad game. You pull him out of the lineup. Ryan Murray goes in, and you're like, different player, different dynamic. But Ryan Murray is your 7th guy. Are you serious?
Yeah, that's a good life to live right there. So yeah, I think the Avs got better today with this trade, and that's really the conversation.
And they didn't give anybody up off their NHL roster right away.
Exactly.
Yep. Which, just to add to our conversation from earlier today, really only enhances that if they're going to continue to add at forward.
So
one of them
got to
go.
just real quick. I mean, it is kind of interesting now because now you add a defenseman. So to your point, AJ, at full health, the blue line is probably a little overcrowded.
McDermott has to be a forward now.
Yep.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, for at least time being, but I don't know. Now I kind of sit here and I say, all right, do you move Ryan Murray? Then McDermott kind of becomes your 8th D because as we also discussed with Felix, you now have another guy that's got the fighting, tough guy, intimidating, but he contributes in a much bigger way.
Actually plays hockey for you.
Right. So now you don't feel the need to have McDermott on the cusp of your lineup as much. So I don't know. Do you add Ryan Murray in the package that goes back if let's say you're pursuing Claude Giroux? Do you add Ryan
he makes
Murray
the same money as Tyson Jost. So if
right.
I would say
purely a cap dump, yeah.
Yeah, if it's purely a cap dump, you just be like, well, here's your $2 million in Ryan Murray.
Right, and then you put some fun condition on a pick again if you want to.
Whatever, yeah.
Whatever, and so you do that. You send Ryan Murray. You LTIR Landy. That makes the Giroux money fit. Then what? You just have like Darren Helm as your 13th forward. You don't really have to subtract up front.
Yeah, I'm whatever at forward, right?
No doubt conversations going to be had by the Avs front office over the next week, I am sure.
Yeah.
Or they know exactly what they're already like going to try to do, and this is just like the first evil step forward. Yeah.
They have a whole 17 chain plan dominoes that are falling down as
Andy hits LTIR on Thursday.
Yeah.
The same night that Giroux plays 1,000 games. And Friday, and then again Saturday. Or no, what day did you say was the day off? Oh, Sunday. Then Sunday, they trade for Claude Giroux. And we're doing this all over again.
There you go. Okay, we've done a whole second podcast today. Now
we knew it was going to happen. I was right about the timing. I was wrong about the day.
Yep.
Yeah.
But also, Josh Manson in Anaheim. Should just meet them in California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally drive up.
Be in the lineup tomorrow night.
Well, so seriously, I kind of said it in passing there, but then like the more I thought about it, it makes perfect sense. Because it's so funny, man. And it's always one of those things where like when you look back on stuff, it's like you should have just gone with like your gut. I asked Bednar, I said, "Are you guys gonna call anyone up?" And he like paused for a minute. He goes, No, we don't have any plans to. And it was just one of those things where I was like, what an odd way to answer that. Like, why did you sound so suspicious? When you're like, no, we're not doing that. But like, I didn't really think anything of it. And this makes sense why. They knew we're not going to call anyone up because the guy that we want is
he's already
right
in
down
California.
the road.
Yeah.
Well, the problem here is that he's actually not in California.
Right. They were on the
Ducks
road,
are in New York doing their East trip. So that sucks. But he's got plenty of time now to get on a plane and fly all the way back home.
Sleep in his own
and
bed
worst
tonight.
case, I was gonna, for real. Because they're not skating tomorrow. They're not doing morning skate, Bednar said. So fly home tonight, sleep in your own bed, get up in the morning, and drive up to LA.
There you go. We've solved the mystery. Josh Manson, now an Av. Any final thoughts from either of you?
42 has ever been a 42.
I can look.
Brad Malone comes to mind, maybe.
What number was Sam Henley?
I can't
There's
remember.
a name.
I'll pull up the hockey reference.
Sam Henley was 42.
There you go. Sam
Was he?
Henley, Brad
Hell yeah.
Malone, Ray Macias,
Hey!
Chris Stewart for 1 year, and John Clem when they were still in Quebec.
Nice.
Should also mention, for what it's worth, he has worn a letter in Anaheim for the last 3 seasons. Again, we talked about it with the Avs. They like to target high character guys, outspoken leadership types. So it's just another guy that falls into that model.
Look, how do we feel about it? This is exactly the archetype of a deal that I thought they were going to go and they were going to get a physical guy. Yep. My preference was DeHaan because of his work with the puck in transition is really good. But with Manson, you're talking about he fits a lot of the little things that the Avs emphasize in their system and then adds in
an archetype that they didn't really have on D outside of Curtis McDermott, who we know the story there.
Yep.
Well, and you do also have to give a little bit of credit to the Avs coaching staff and the pro scouts and I guess the coaching staff, because I mean, not to sound too much like the exact type of people we were making fun of on the earlier show, but a guy like Josh Manson, who is shown to be a very good defenseman at different points in his NHL career, actually just kind of up until last season, the Avs have shown that they can bring guys in. And to your point, AJ, when they identify this guy does little things that we like to do, I mean, we've seen countless guys, even Curtis McDermott, really kind of excel relative to their own game, playing with the Avs in their systems for this coaching staff. Again, we talked about it earlier. Jack Johnson has looked passable in the
Perfectly
top
fine.
four for what, a month and a half now?
Perfectly, genuinely, Jack Johnson has been fine.
Yep.
Like, there have been bad games in there, but not a bad stretch. And the fact that he doesn't do anything on offense anymore is a problem, but it's a problem that you mitigate by playing him on a third pairing, which is where he was when the Avs defense was healthy. He's been elevated, and now he gets to probably move back in time when the Avs once again get healthy. Between Byram and Girard, like, I love what this means for how dynamic Colorado's healthy defense is and how hard it is to play against.
Bam.
Because he's going to make it. Manson is really going to bring all the dudes who want toughness and physicality and all that just got it in a
Box
big way.
checked. Yeah.
And all those of us who wanted that, but also wanted a guy who wasn't completely helpless in every other aspect of being an NHL hockey player, box checked.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I want to see how he fits into Colorado, because you never really know. He's going to be asked to do certain things that he hasn't done a lot of in his career.
It really felt like Patrick Nemeth never really settled into the Avs last year, even as a guy who had played for the team before.
Well, and then you look what happened when he got to New York, and Patrick Nemeth's career just cratered.
Yep.
Something about his play just completely fell apart after the deadline last year, and he never recovered.
Yep.
You're hoping that you don't see the same thing with Manson, but the upside is a lot higher.
Agreed.
So, and then when it gets to the offseason and re-signing and can they afford him and blah, blah, blah.
That's all the bridge you cross when you get there.
We will see. Probably, you would assume that this is a rental for now, and then we'll see.
Yep. So
for right now, deal with trying to win a Stanley Cup with the guys that you got in front of you, and they just got better. Their defense just got better. It just got harder to play against. I'm very into this.
Yeah.
This makes them nastier net front. This makes their PK better. This makes a lot of aspects of their of what you would have considered some of the weaker areas. He addresses those, and it just at the cost of nothing off your NHL roster right now. There's no minus off your roster for right now.
I'm in with everything you just said.
Great. Probably not the last time you'll hear the Avs in a trade getting done in the next week, but it's the first time you're hearing it. So buckle up. The ride is only starting. We appreciate all y'all tuning in for our second full podcast of the day.
Special shout out to Felix for hopping on with us.
Appreciate Felix jumping on like that. Super awesome. Go check out the Crashing the Pond podcast. They're super dope. It's playtime for my dog, so hopefully the Avs don't go make another trade. We're out of here for hopefully the rest of the day, but you never know. We'll be back the next time the Avs do something.